The strangest thing about losing someone is that sometimes they are still sitting right in front of you. My name is Harold. I am 84 years old, and I only understood what love truly was after my wife forgot my name. For most of my life, I believed love was something you felt, something warm and steady that carried you through the years. I met Margaret when I was 22 and she was 19 at a church picnic where neither of us wanted to be. She laughed at something I said about the lemonade being mostly water, and I remember thinking that if I could hear that laugh every day, I would be a fortunate man. We were married 11 months later in a small ceremony, with folding chairs and my brother playing the piano slightly off-key. We built what most people would call a good life. I worked at the same manufacturing plant for 41 years. Margaret stayed home when the children were small, then later worked part-time at the library. We argued about money in our 30s, about parenting in our 40s, and about where to spend Christmas in our 50s. Nothing dramatic, just the ordinary friction of two people trying to grow old in the same direction. If you had asked me at 60 what love was, I would have said it was loyalty, or companionship, or the comfort of someone knowing how you take your coffee without asking. I would have pointed to our mortgage paid off, our children grown, our vacations to the lake every summer. I thought love was the accumulation of shared years. When Margaret turned 76, she began misplacing things. First, it was her glasses, which we later found in the freezer next to a bag of peas. Then, it was words. She would pause mid-sentence and look at me, as if the next thought had slipped behind a locked door. We laughed at first. We called it senior moments, but the laughter grew thinner. The diagnosis came on a gray Tuesday morning. Dementia. The doctor spoke gently, carefully, as if each word needed to be placed on the table between us without breaking. I remember nodding as though I understood what that meant, but the truth is, I did not. I thought it would be forgetfulness. I did not realize it would be erosion. In the early stages, Margaret knew she was forgetting. That was the cruelest part. She would sit at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug and say, "Harold, something is wrong with me." I would tell her we would manage, that we had always managed. I believed that. I had fixed broken pipes, dented cars, strained relationships with our teenage son. I thought this was another problem to solve. But dementia is not a problem you solve. It is a slow untying. The first time she forgot my name, we were in the living room. She was looking through an old photo album, the one with the faded green cover. She pointed to a picture of us on our wedding day and said, "That was a good man." I smiled and said, "I still am." She looked at me, polite and puzzled, and asked, "And you are?" It did not feel like a blow. It felt like a draft through an open door. Subtle, but unmistakable. I told her my name. She repeated it carefully, as if committing it to memory. An hour later, she asked again. Over the next months, my name became something that drifted in and out of her mind. Sometimes I was Harold. Sometimes I was Sir. Once, I was her father. That one stung in a place I cannot quite describe. She reached for my hand and called me by another man's name, and I realized that the history I carried so carefully inside me no longer existed in hers. I wish I could tell you that I handled it with grace. I did not. There were nights I sat in the bathroom with the fan running so she would not hear me cry. I felt erased. I had been her husband for more than 60 years, and now I was a stranger in my own home. Our children urged me to consider a care facility. They meant well. They saw how tired I was. Dementia does not rest at night. Margaret would wake at 2 in the morning, convinced she needed to catch a train. She would search the closets for her purse, asking me where her mother was. I would guide her back to bed again and again, explaining softly that she was safe, that she was home. There is a particular loneliness in answering the same question 20 times a day. Where are we? Who are you? Have I eaten? Each time I answered, part of me wanted to say, "Don't you remember? Don't you remember us?" But that would have been for me, not for her. One afternoon, about 3 years into her illness, she looked at me with a kind of calm curiosity and said, "You are very kind. Do you visit me often?" I told her I lived there. She smiled politely, the way you smile at a neighbor. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I had been clinging to the wrong version of love. I had believed that love was built on shared memory, on mutual recognition, on the comfort of being known. But here I was, standing in front of the woman I had loved for 6 decades, and she did not know my name, my face, or our story. If love depended on those things, then ours should have been gone. And yet, every morning when she opened her eyes and saw me, even if she did not know who I was, she would relax. There was a softness in her expression, a sense of safety. She did not remember our wedding, but she felt calm when I held her hand. She did not recall our children's births, but she leaned toward me when she was frightened. Love, I began to understand, was no longer about being remembered. It was about being chosen. Each day, I had a decision to make. I could measure what I was losing, or I could focus on what I could still give. I started introducing myself to her every morning as if we were meeting for the first time. "Good morning, Margaret. My name is Harold. I am your husband." Sometimes she would laugh and say, "Well, that is a lovely surprise." Other times, she would simply nod. There was a strange freedom in it. Without the weight of our history, I could love her in the present tense, not because she remembered the young man at the church picnic, but because she needed someone steady in front of her now. I learned the rhythm of her days. Mornings were clearer. Evenings brought confusion and fear. I kept the house quiet. I labeled drawers. I cooked her favorite meals, even when she forgot she liked them. I brushed her hair the way she used to brush our daughters before school. Small acts, repeated endlessly. Friends would say, "She is not really there anymore." I understood what they meant, but I did not agree. She was there in her smile when I played her favorite hymn on the radio. She was there in the way her hand squeezed mine during thunderstorms. The parts of her that loved and felt comfort had not vanished. They had simply become wordless. In her final year, she spoke very little. Some days, not at all. I would sit beside her by the window and read aloud from the newspaper, though I doubted she followed the stories. It was not the information that mattered. It was the sound of a familiar voice. The last clear sentence she ever said to me came unexpectedly. I was helping her into bed, and she looked at me with sudden focus. She touched my cheek and said, "You are my home." Then the clarity faded, and she drifted back into silence. She never called me Harold again. When she passed, the house felt impossibly loud in its quiet. I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the kitchen counter, as if the walls might explain how 62 years could disappear so completely. I thought I would feel relief after the long vigil, but what I felt was gratitude, not because the suffering had ended, though I was thankful for that, but because I had been allowed to love her in a way I never had before. Before the illness, love was intertwined with expectation. We expected conversation, shared jokes, recognition. During those years of dementia, expectation fell away. There was only presence. only patience, only the daily decision to remain. I used to believe that being known was the greatest comfort in a marriage. Now, I believe that being there, even when you are no longer recognized, is the greater act. Love is not sustained by memory, it is sustained by commitment. At 84, I understand something that the younger version of me could not. Real love is quiet. It does not announce itself in grand gestures. It shows up at 2 a.m. when someone is afraid of a train that does not exist. It answers the same question again and again, without anger. It introduces itself patiently, even when it has been there for 60 years. If you are listening to me, and you still have someone who knows your name, who remembers your shared history, do not assume that memory is guaranteed. Sit with them. Ask the extra question. Forgive the small offenses. Time is not as generous as it seems. And if you ever find yourself loving someone who no longer recognizes you, understand this. You are not loving them for what you receive in return. You are loving them because you choose to. That choice, made day after day, is the purest form of love I have ever known. My name is Harold. I am 84 years old, and the woman who forgot my name taught me what love truly means.